a little earlier, I spoke to Sajda Mughal, a survivor of the 7/7 attacks on London in 2005. She's the director of the Jan Trust, which supports disadvantaged women and girls. We were also joined from Beaconsfield by Dominic Grieve, who, until Parliament was dissolved for the general election, was Conservative chair of the Intelligence and Security Select Committee. I first asked Sajda Mughal what went through her mind when she saw the latest terror attack unfolding in London.
When I see the news unfolding in terms of these attacks, it takes me right back to 12 years ago on July the 7th, 2005, when I survived the Piccadilly Tube bombings. I remember and relive the day in terms of hearing people screaming, seeing people injured, seeing the blood, people banging on the doors and the carriages in the tube when the bomb went off halfway through King's Cross through to Russell Square. And it's something I won't forget.
And the fear that engendered?
The fear immediately kicks in. So the news breaks and all of a sudden I feel scared. I go through a wave of emotions. I become upset, I get angry, I'll become upset again. And it does that when I hear of these attacks.
And the idea that we haven't been able to prevent more of these attacks, what's your view on that? Are they inevitable, do you think?
Well, I can tell you hand on heart in terms of the work that I've been doing since 7/7. So having survived 7/7, it left me with many unanswered questions. And so I took that step to work with my community, the Muslim community, to basically prevent extremism and online radicalisation via mothers and wives, working with them via our programme Web Guardian so that they can prevent this from happening. And so I have had mothers and wives come back firsthand to say, we've stopped this from happening with our family. So I can tell you, in terms of grassroots work and community work, that's been happening and that's been working.
Where do you think the failures are?
I think we need to be asking questions in terms of specifically around reporting to the anti-terror hotline. So when the reports have gone through, why have they not been escalated, or how have they been assessed as well? I understand that one of the attackers was assessed as a low, in terms of being low risk. How? We need to ask questions around that and why. And also in terms of policing.
Dominic Grieve, you've heard what Sajda Mughal has to say there. Surely the London Bridge attacks are the failure of the biggest kind. What do you say to people who watched footage of one of the attackers on a television documentary unfurling an ISIS flag in Regent's Park? What do you say to people who simply don't understand why, at the very least, he wasn't being constantly watched?
It may be that there has been a serious failure in respect of the intelligence work of the agencies, or indeed the police. But I think one's got to be a little bit careful about jumping to conclusions. Because of the numbers who may be interested in extremism, inevitably any intelligence which comes to the agencies has to be assessed and filtered and prioritised. And depending on what they will pick up in that process, they will have to decide where their priorities lie. Over the last few years, the agencies have, in fact, succeeded in stopping a large number of attacks. And that shows that their basic method seems to me to be quite successful.
But we can't talk about success when we've seen 3 attacks. Sorry to interrupt you. We cannot talk about success when we've seen 3 brutal attacks in a matter of months.
Of course, the presence of multiple attacks of the kind we've just had is going to make people very disquieted and very anxious. But 100% guarantees of security are not going to be possible to provide.
Sajda Mughal, what do you make of that?
Whilst I hear what Dominic has said, look, I'm going to be frank with you. There are some serious questions we need to ask and we need to get them answered, OK? There may have been assessments carried out in terms of one of the attackers, but then we need to ask questions around the assessment. As I said earlier, how were they assessed, what happened, etc. But we need to do this fast as well. So this is my concern. Number one, we need to ask those questions. We have to get them answered. I'm sorry, but the phrase lessons learnt, we can't keep learning lessons. We are losing innocent individuals. Luckily, I survived, but we've lost many in these attacks. One is too many.
Very, very briefly, Mr. Grieve. I mean, we have seen the number of officers in England and Wales cut by almost 20,000, the number of community support officers cut by 11% in the last year. As a Conservative MP, can you legitimately argue that a Conservative government means a more secure Britain?
Well, I'm quite satisfied it means a more secure Britain, and if you'll forgive my saying so, I find it rather difficult to take lessons from Mr. Corbyn or Mr. McDonnell when they've actively suggested that MI5 should be disbanded and one of them called for the police no longer to be armed. That is a level of fantasy which I'm afraid disqualifies them, frankly, from this discussion.
Sajda Mughal,
Thank you.
Dominic Grieve, thank you very much.